America didn't just recognize Max Baer Jr., they froze him in time. For more than half a century, the moment his face appeared on screen, people didn't see a man. They saw Jethro Bodine. The innocent grin, the exaggerated confusion, the oversized strength paired with childlike simplicity. The character from the Beverly Hillbillies wasn't just popular, it was culturally permanent. Reruns ran endlessly. Generations grew up laughing at the same jokes, the same expressions, the same version of Max Baer Jr. that television never allowed to age. But what most people never questioned was what happens when an actor becomes too successful at playing someone else. Before we continue, take 1 second to like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss more real stories like this. Max Baer Jr. wasn't uneducated, naive, or simple-minded. In reality, he was sharp, disciplined, and deeply aware of how Hollywood worked and how cruel it could be. Yet the industry didn't reward range, it rewarded repetition, and the audience, unknowingly, helped lock him into a single image he could never escape. Long before Jethro Bodine existed, Max Baer Jr. was born into a life already shadowed by fame and pressure. His father, Max Baer Sr., wasn't just famous, he was legendary. A heavyweight boxing champion, a symbol of raw power, masculinity, and spectacle. Growing up under that name meant expectations were automatic: strength, confidence, public performance, winning. But Max Jr. wasn't raised to be reckless or unfocused. He was trained to observe, to think ahead, to understand that fame, if mishandled, could destroy a person long before age ever did. When Max Baer Jr. entered acting, he didn't stumble into success. He worked for it. He studied performance, structure, and audience psychology. When the Beverly Hillbillies premiered in 1962, no one expected it to become a cultural phenomenon. It was meant to be light entertainment, simple humor for a changing America. Instead, it exploded. The show dominated ratings, it reshaped television comedy, and Jethro Bodine became one of the most recognizable characters in American history. For Max Baer Jr., this should have been a launching pad. Instead, it became a ceiling. Hollywood executives didn't see a versatile actor, they saw a brand, a safe, repeatable product. Every script offered afterward carried the same expectation: be Jethro again, speak slower, look confused, be harmless, be funny, but never serious. Max tried to push back. He requested different roles, dramatic parts, intelligent characters, anything that allowed him to step outside the shadow of the straw hat and wide-eyed stare. But the industry wasn't interested in growth. It was interested in familiarity. The irony was brutal. The more popular Jethro became, the more invisible Max Baer Jr. himself grew. By the late 1960s, reruns ensured that Jethro never left television, even as Max tried to move forward. Casting directors couldn't unsee the character. Audiences laughed before he even spoke. Serious roles evaporated. The same success that made him rich also quietly erased his future as an actor. What most people didn't realize was that Max Baer Jr. wasn't panicking. He was watching. He studied contracts, ownership rights, distribution models. While others chased applause, Max chased control. He noticed something crucial that many actors ignored: fame fades, but ownership lasts. Acting paid well, but producing, controlling, and distributing paid forever. Instead of asking Hollywood to see him differently, Max made a decision that would define his hidden second life. He stopped asking for permission. Walking away from acting wasn't an emotional breakdown, it was a calculated exit. Max Baer Jr. understood that staying visible meant staying trapped, so he chose distance, silence, strategy. And that choice would lead him into one of the most unexpected transformations in Hollywood history, one that would quietly make him more powerful than the role that once defined him. But that transformation didn't happen overnight. First, he had to disappear. And when Max Baer Jr. vanished from the screen, America assumed his story ended. It hadn't. It was just beginning. For someone the world thought it knew so well, Max Baer Jr. remains deeply misunderstood. As the years moved forward, curiosity about his disappearance only grew. Fans wanted answers. Journalists wanted explanations. Hollywood wanted closure. But Max Baer Jr. gave none of them what they expected. He didn't reinvent himself publicly. He didn't return for sentimental interviews. He didn't rewrite his past to make others comfortable. Instead, he stayed quiet. That silence was often mistaken for bitterness, but those closest to the truth understand something very different. Max Baer Jr. wasn't angry at his past. He simply refused to live inside it. He had already experienced what fame could do when it becomes louder than identity. He had no interest in repeating the experiment. Privately, Max continued living a life shaped by discipline and intention. He remained involved in business ventures, carefully managing investments built decades earlier. While many of his contemporaries struggled with financial instability, Max enjoyed a level of security rarely discussed because it didn't fit the narrative of a forgotten TV star. But public memory doesn't reward stability, it rewards spectacle. And so, Max Baer Jr.'s story became flattened once again, this time not into comedy, but into mystery. People asked, what happened to him, as if something tragic must have occurred, as if stepping away from the spotlight could only mean loss. The truth is far less dramatic and far more powerful. Max Baer Jr. chose a life where he was no longer consumed. He understood something that many celebrities realize too late. Fame doesn't just give, it takes. It takes privacy, it takes authorship of one's own story, and sometimes it takes the future. By refusing nostalgia reunions and endless callbacks to Jethro Bodine, Max protected himself from becoming a museum piece. He didn't want to be preserved in amber for public comfort. He wanted to exist as a full human being, even if that meant being less visible. Today, when his name surfaces, it's usually framed as a curiosity, a footnote, a whatever happened to headline. But that framing misses the deeper truth. Max Baer Jr. didn't disappear, he opted out. In an industry that treats relevance as survival, opting out is a radical act. It requires confidence, foresight, and a willingness to be misunderstood. Max accepted all three costs willingly. Looking back, his life tells a quiet but important story about success, not the loud kind measured in applause or ratings, but the kind measured in autonomy, in choosing when to speak, when to leave, and when to stop being consumed by expectations set by others. The tragedy isn't that Max Baer Jr. lived a double life. The tragedy is that most people only recognize one kind of success. Max Baer Jr.'s real legacy isn't Jethro Bodine. It's the example of a man who refused to let his most famous moment become his only one, even if the world never noticed the difference. And maybe that's the point.